Okay, I'm going to talk about the Dudley inversion bubble. This is just a blue line drawing of the hill. This is the launch, and to the northeast of the launch is a little spur sticking out which comes down to a rock shelf. So this area here is a rock shelf which comes around here. There's a creek flows out here, so the slope behind the hill is a valley feeding up there, and this hilltop is a ridge that goes up to the south in that direction. So this cliff runs along to what we call the magic bowl, is deeper into the corner over there. The ocean is out in front of the rock shelf. The black lines, I'm trying to describe where the air is moving, or the wind. So we have trees on this side of the launch and trees on this side of the launch, and the launch is a little cutting between the trees, and there's bushes on this cliff. This hill is facing the east, so this east is in this direction, north to the right, west up there. So the launch faces east. The sea breeze blows in from the east to the northeast. To the south is the magic bowl, which has a height. This ridge goes up and around, trapping air in front of the bowl. So out here, perhaps about 500 meters offshore, there could be white caps, showing that there's wind on the water. And this wind is coming from much further out over the ocean where there is warm water. So this wind then comes in, and in this area, for the first roughly 500 meters or so, the ocean surface can be perfectly smooth, no white caps. This water is most likely cooler than further out to sea. In front of this cliff, there is heavy, dense air, and it's trapped in front of the cliff. So on the ground, it is calm, but there may be a wind direction either from north to south or south to north, depending on the angle of the wind. The inversion bubble normally occurs when it's more of a northeast direction, and so there can be a slight north to south movement along the rock shelf. When you're standing there, it may be calm or just a gentle breeze. So in front of the rock shelf, the air can be just stationary or slightly mixing. To this side of the rock shelf and further up the beach, there can be a wind blowing up that creek, which can catch people out. Because there's no cliff there and the creek is there, it allows the bubble to escape. So sometimes there's no bubble where the creek is, so the wind may be blowing up that creek. Now when we get to the top of the hill and look around the launch, the streamers at launch may be calm, or they may even be backwind, and the trees at the back of launch are often moving, like it looks like it's going to be windy, but at the front of launch is just perfectly calm, and the wind may just switch backwards and forwards on the launch. This little red circle here is showing the wind gradient. So here we have trees, and here we have trees. And where we have trees, they grab the air and slow the wind down at ground level. So this little diagram is a picture of wind gradient showing the speed on this axis and the height above ground on that axis. And it shows that when you're close to the ground, the wind speed is slow, and as you lift higher above where the trees are no longer grabbing the air, the wind speed increases. So along this cliff top where the trees are, we have a wind gradient can occur. That's on top of the bubble, which the inversion bubble, which we're going to move on to on the next pages. Trees on the hill with a wind gradient where the wind lower down can be less than the wind higher up. So that's a sort of a normal behavior, but we have this inversion bubble going on where there's an edge which may be very sharp. There may be some mixing and so some turbulence along that layer. This is definitely like an edge where below it may be no wind or just a gentle wind along the rock shelf, as I described, going like 90 degrees to the sea breeze. And so it can be calm even out to the front of the rock shelf. So we have this boundary layer where the wind above it can be strong and the wind below it is nil. So if we're flying above the boundary layer, we have this wind speed adding to our airspeed. And when we go below the boundary layer, all of a sudden that wind speed vanishes and we only have a small amount of wind speed. So our airspeed drops as we sink below that layer. So this boundary layer, it moves up and down during the day, and sometimes it's low and below the launch, so people are able to launch above the inversion bubble and climb up. But then the layer may lift up again, so people arriving to the launch can only see people flying, but it's calm or backwind on launch. So the situation varies all the time. Each day is like changeable during the day. I have experienced, well, lots of different situations, but just to demonstrate the extreme, out in front of the rock shelf over the ocean, so it's several, perhaps a couple of 100 meters, at least 100 meters from the hill, and about 200 feet high, where I've been barely penetrating in 20 knots of wind. And because of the glide angle on the glider relative to the angle of the wind, I was gradually descending, and at an instant flew from above the boundary layer to below the boundary layer. While I was above the boundary layer, my airspeed was the wind speed of about 20 knots. And when I went below the boundary layer, there was no wind. The glider just stalled and vertically dropped straight down, and I had enough height to turn and fly in and land in calm air on the rock shelf, while I was barely penetrating above the inversion bubble. Sometimes the air down here may just be all a mixture like a washing machine, so when you launch in the wind, it's just not creating any lift on the glider, and I sink straight down. Coming back to this situation at the edge of the cliff, where we've got the trees, the wind gradient exaggerated by the trees and added to with an inversion bubble, this airspeed, as you change your height, just above the cliff edge can cause people to stall into the trees, which has occurred 4 times that I know of. Once here, once here, once here. No, only 3 that I know of that landed in the trees from the stall. The other stalls have been in other locations, but still due to this inversion bubble. Now, sometimes the edge of this inversion bubble, which is happening just around launch height, because that's where the air difference between the trapped air and the wind blowing over the top is mixing, will cause a turbulent feeling after launch in this area when you're trying to get up. And it makes a huge difference when you launch, whether you're at the bottom of launch height or the top of launch height, because that's where the boundary layer often makes the difference. That if you launch from the bottom, you're probably going to just bomb out on the rock shelf, whereas if you launch from the top of the launch, you may get just above where this mixing is occurring and climb away. This area here where you've got this wind and all this other mixing that I'm talking about with the inversion bubble and the wind gradient, this area along here may have an area of more turbulence. And once you climb above the bubble, then you leave that turbulent area. And that turbulent area can be different heights at different locations. It's like a bubble where it may be like over the launch like this and over the bowl, but not in places. So it's like moving during the day up and about without being able to see it.